So I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Tuesday, March 24th, 2020. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We kind of break the rules here for Native Radio. We don't do prayers and we don't do buffalo speeches. We don't get into any of that mystic stuff either. We take a tough look at our history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity, and we may step on a few toes along the way, and we may do it specifically tonight. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that is heaped upon us, and we do it all right here, normally live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, but we're audio is live tonight, but video is not live tonight. Let me explain. Facebook live stream is down tonight, so we are live on our website, which is www.letstalknative.com. We are recording video of the show, which we will put up on our YouTube channel, and the audio we'll put up on it as a podcast. So you'll be able to catch the show later, or you can listen to it now, but only on our website. So sorry about that, but this is a Facebook problem. Look, I'm the show's host and producer, and I'm joined here in studio by Jake Proud, who's managing the audio and our video. Let me get right into it, I guess. Obviously, we have officially completed 1 week of the shutdown caused by the coronavirus. So I want to run through a few numbers, but then what I want to talk about, and what I've promoted as the topic I was going to talk about, is the idea of group worship, church, synagogue, mosque, and Longhouse. I want to parse that out a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about how do you balance the either the need, the desire to fulfill some sort of faith-based obligation to worship in a time that you're being told you can't. And so I want to talk about that tonight. But first, let me go through some of the numbers. And on the last show, things are changing real fast. And I know, look, I know there's a whole lot of people who have different opinions about what this is all about, and the idea of talking about numbers seems like fear mongering. I'm just trying to put some perspective to it all. So we did the show a couple of days ago. The number of cases in the world was 300,000. Today we're at 400,000 or 421,367, thereabouts. It's a moving target, so it's probably a little higher than that actually at the moment. This is when I wrote it all down. China was at 81,000, now they're 81,170. Italy was at 53,578. Now they're at 69,176. The United States was at 26,111 on our last show. That was just on Saturday. Today, they are double that, 53,609. So just putting that into its perspective. Look, the United States is number 3 on the world counter list for the total number of cases. Okay, they're behind China and then Italy. It looks like Italy's going to overtake China. Like I said, they're only about 11,000 behind China, and the numbers that are coming up daily for Italy will have them overtake it in a day or two. The United States isn't far behind. And here's the other thing about the United States. The United States is actually only about 1,500. They're close on the heels of active cases behind Italy. Italy's got the most active cases. It's let me see, what do we have here? They're up to 54,030 active cases, and the United States is at 52,533. So again, right on the heels. They're only about 1,500 active cases behind Italy. China's active case list has dropped off. They're only about 4,700. So again, I realize I'm throwing a bunch of numbers that might they're rattling off fast, so you may not be catching it all. But here's my point. My point is that the United States is going to overtake Italy in the number of active cases probably by tomorrow. In a few days, Italy will overtake China in the total number of cases that they had. Now, most of China's cases are done. The people have recovered. I mean, they had a not too a minimal death count, but most of the people have gotten through this. The number of active cases in China is, like I said, it's only about 4,700 active cases, and Italy and the United States are blowing that out of the water at this point. And I gotta say, United States is going to overtake Italy. United States, good old USA, is going to be number one. That is until India catches them. But so I want to talk about that. Now, the other thing to also put it in perspective, and I don't think people get this, the testing. At this point, the United States, and I pulled up a website that was giving a map of how many tests were done in various states and what the total number. And that map was from yesterday, and they had it about 300,000 tests that were done as of yesterday. It's more than that now. But even if you were to throw that up a higher number, if 350,000 tests have been done in the United States, that's only 1/10 of 1%. 1/10 of 1%. There's 330 million people in the United States. Even if 500,000 get done, that's still only 0.15%. If 1 million people get tested, again, I'm trying to make this easy here. If 1 million people, when 1 million people get tested, and they're nowhere near that yet. When 1 million people, that's still only going to be 0.3% of the overall population. So anybody who's saying that this is going to peak in a week or two or 21 days, I don't know how you can base that on any reality when you realize how very few tests have been done. Even in New York State, where most of the confirmed cases are in New York City, but they break it out by state. New York State is, as of yesterday, had only tested 61,000 people. Even if that's 71,000 people today, it was 61,000 people yesterday. That's only 0.3% of the population of New York State. New Jersey, which has a real big number for the size of that state, they've actually only tested 0.03% of their population. They've actually got more cases than people they've tested. You're going to ask, well, how's that possible? Well, I got to think a lot of those New Jersey folks are getting tested in New York. But even between New York and New Jersey, it's only about 63,000 people as of yesterday. Again, even if that's up to 70,000, it's still a tiny number. You look at other states, California, which is like the third. It's New York, New Jersey, and then California. It drops off, quite a bit after New York. But California with 12,000 cases, they've only tested 12,000 people, or 12,000 people. That's 0.03% of their overall population. California is the most populated state in the country. So I'm saying this because you're hearing a lot of people trying to downplay this and say, well, the numbers still aren't that high, and that it should peak. That they're going to be successful in flattening the curve. Man, that's a nice hope. It's a nice hope to think that they're going to flatten the curve. But I got to tell you, when you consider how very little testing has been done in the United States, and again, New York State has a lot of testing done compared to the rest of the country, it is going to be scary to think how these numbers are going to spike. And there's no evidence at this point to suggest that the spread is not outpacing the testing. So while I've heard the governor in the past and other places say, well, the numbers are going to spike because we're increasing the testing. Yes, they are going to spike in terms of confirmed cases because of the testing. But not only because of the testing. The numbers are going to spike because it's still spreading. And I think I heard the governor say that today. Today he backed away from the whole notion that it's only spiking because of testing. He knows that it's spreading. New York City, they turned the Jacob Javits Center, which is the convention center, huge glass building. I've been there a couple of times. Used to go there for the auto show and that kind of thing. They turned the Jacob Javits Center into a hospital. It is, and they're running out of stuff. And they haven't even run out of ventilators yet, but they have run out of things like masks. Even for testing, they've not only run out of some of the chemicals for testing, and they're in. So Erie County, I think, just got their, one of their chemicals in. They're actually running out of the swabs. I mean, think about this: a stick with a cotton ball on it. The United States is in short supply of sticks with cotton balls on them. I mean, that's absurd to me. But there you have it. So, country ready for a pandemic? No, not even close. And that's not even getting to the crucial stuff, like ventilators. And I have a whole another concern about ventilators, because what I'm not sure is, if you get so sick that not only do you have to be hospitalized, but when you get to that point where you have to be put on a ventilation machine, and just so you understand, we're not talking about an oxygen mask. We're talking about being intubated, where they put the tube down your throat and they're pumping air into your oxygen into your lungs, and then letting your own chest cavity exhale by itself. I mean, you're probably out. They've actually probably put you under for this. If you're at that point, I don't know how many people are surviving this. I don't know how many people go from a ventilator into recovery. It's a scary thought, but I got too much time on my hands, so I'm thinking about these things. So, all right, now let me shift and get to what I wanted to talk about. Churches have canceled their masses and figuring out how they're going to do this. Synagogues have canceled their worship. Mosques have all canceled, and so you get into this debate. Okay, if you have faith, why can't you still go to church? If you have faith that God is going to protect you, or if you're in a situation where you think your faith requires this, and look, some of these faiths do, that it's required that you go to church every Sunday, or you go to mosque, or you go to synagogue or temple. If your faith says that you have to, but the law says that you can't, and you're in this situation where you've got this whole idea of, whatever happens to separation of church and state. I heard people say that. How can the government tell you can't have worshiping services? Well, that's one question. The other question is, does your faith really require that you have to do these things every week, regardless of the danger? Because I got to tell you, I saw quite a number of posts that suggested that some of these church gatherings was where a bunch of people got infected. So, is it a sin to miss church? I don't know, or synagogue or mosque. I don't know. I mean, are there conditions that your church your faith can take a back seat to the conditions of the world? I gotta think so. Now, I don't know, but it seems to me also, and I know if this sounds crude, then I'm sorry. I thought the same thing when I started hearing about armed guards in a church. Is there a better place to die than in church? I mean, if you're really a believer, if you believe all that stuff, doesn't it seem like dying in church or getting sick in church is like your ticket to heaven? I mean, look, I'm not trying to make light of it, but I don't know. Maybe all these religious people need to, if that's what they have to do, prioritize. Then I don't know. I just think it's absurd that this is even a debate, and where the absurdity gets amplified for me is when it turns to Longhouse. So here's where I may rub some people the wrong way here, because we're at the time of the year. We came through midwinters. Now we're at Maple Festival or ceremony, whatever you want to call it. Maple harvest, if you want to call it that. But the Thanksgiving for maple, for the sap, the sugar that we make with it. This is the time of year for that. Now, and I heard some people say, "Oh, we got to do that. We've got to do the ceremony." Do you? Really? Because this is where some of this stuff gets difficult. Our Thanksgivings, and that's what they are. I mean, I know we call them ceremony. We call it, we say, "Oh, I'm going to Longhouse," and that's what I mean. I know we call it that. We call it ceremony. We call it, we almost make it into a religious sacrament. But that's not what it is. Not from our cultural standpoint, it isn't. It's a Thanksgiving. And it's the other thing that turned into, because it's our culture has been mashed up with other cultures like Christianity and religion. The idea of doing festivals, doing these celebrations of various times of the year, is a social and a cultural thing, not a religious thing. And I know when I hear people say, well, we've got to do it, otherwise we aren't honoring the Creator. And if we do these things, the Creator is going to take care of us. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. In our culture, and I'm speaking Haudenosaunee here, Ongwe, Haudenosaunee culture, we don't have that. This notion of the Creator, the supreme being, the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-hearing, all-fixing supreme being, that's not in our culture. It's not in our creation story, and the creation story is a story. We don't have that Creator, that God in our culture. There's no place in our culture where we suggest that there's this supreme being that we have to honor, worship, praise, prayer to. I mean, we talk about the power of creation, and we've referred to it in English as the great mystery. And even though we have the story of the right-handed and left-handed twin, and we have a word, Sakwaya Disu, he who creates, right? But it too is a metaphor. It's like referring to the moon as our grandmother. The moon isn't really our grandmother. It's a metaphor for the relationship we have with the moon. So when we talk about, and we even give it a masculine name like Sakwaya Disu, it's a metaphor, and we've given it essentially through our culture a masculine title, but we don't really believe that there is a supreme being. Now, look, people can believe whatever they want to believe, but I'm just saying, culturally speaking, we don't do these Thanksgivings to give thanks to the Creator. Something got lost along the way. And don't tell me that things haven't got lost. Our folks in the 50s were wearing Plains Indian headdresses. And when our chiefs went down to Washington, D.C. to declare war against the Axis powers, we look like Hollywood Indians, folks. So don't tell me we haven't lost some things along the way and recovered. But here's one of those things that we seem to have picked up. We have the sense that if we don't do these ceremonies, we're going to make the Creator mad at us? If you don't do strawberry festival, the strawberries still come. If you don't do this maple Thanksgiving, you can still draw the sap and make the syrup. The maple still flows. The sap still flows. Creation doesn't stop because we've created this image of the Creator that we have to pray to. Look, I know I say at the beginning of the show, I don't do prayers and buffalo speeches. So you were warned. You were warned from the beginning. If we don't do a ceremony, life doesn't end for us. And it's not a reflection on whether we've lost our culture. As long as we know what those ceremonies are, and we have any number of ways that we can make sure that we fulfill the purpose of those festivals. And the purpose of those festivals is for us to come together. Now, in a time like this, where we're supposed to be practicing social distancing and all that other stuff to prevent the spread of this disease, and this ain't the first time a disease has come our way. And trust me, our people at one point we're very diligent about doing these festivals because they were such a part of our daily lives. And bad things still happened. We still had massacres and smallpox and any number diseases that afflicted our people. And it wasn't because we somehow pissed off this notion of a Creator and that He was punishing us. That's not in our culture. Look, I understand in the Code of Handsome Lake there starts to be this thing about heaven and hell and the Punisher and all that other stuff. But I'm talking about our original culture. So, if you don't go to Longhouse It's not that bad things are going to happen. Here's what happens if you don't go to Longhouse, if you don't do these things. You miss the opportunity to once again share some wisdom with the children. You miss the opportunity to have a setting where like-minded people come together, and we celebrate. Because these Thanksgivings are celebrations. They're social events. They're the gatherings where our families and even people from other communities come. This is the way that we perpetuated our culture and have the cultural exchange with even people from other. It brought communities together. Because we didn't just have one community. And, we would actually, go to somebody else's Longhouse to celebrate these things. But if there was an illness going on, and it does happen. In fact, it did happen. This past midwinter, from what I understand, and I've got it from reliable sources, that people came down with the flu after midwinters. It was probably spread right within the Longhouse. Creator didn't stop the transmission of the flu virus in the Longhouse. Creator's not going to stop the transmission of the COVID-19 virus either. If you're sick, you shouldn't go around people. That's just the bottom line. Not because Cuomo says so or Trump says so. Common sense tells you that. And our elderly and oftentimes our youngest people are the ones who are most vulnerable, at least to the flu. In this situation, this COVID-19 is more dangerous to the elderly, especially with pre-existing conditions. And we have pre-existing conditions. We've got diabetes, more diabetes than we chicken stick at. We have smokers, we have lung disease, we have all kinds of stuff. So our immune systems aren't what they used to be. In fact, they may never were. We obviously didn't fight off influenza or smallpox or any venereal diseases that came with the rape culture of Europe. I know, I get it. Some people, have been criticizing me. So, "Oh, you're just fear mongering and you're buying into what the government's selling you. This is about immunity. It's not about a pathogen." No, it's about both. And the way that you don't spread a disease is to not socialize so much. Nobody's going to punish you. Not the Creator. Nobody's sitting. And if anybody judges you and says, "Oh, you didn't come to Longhouse." Well, no, I didn't. But you know what? I still acknowledge what what the season is about, what the maple represents. If you're gathering maple sap and you're boiling it down and you're making sugar, you're already doing something. You're in a way that very act of doing that is a celebration. Longhouse or no Longhouse. What's happened is we've turned elements of our culture into religious ceremony, sacraments, rituals. And here's the problem with turning these teachable moments into something ritualistic. Now you're doing something out of habit. You're trying to repeat. I've heard people say, "Oh, did we do that right?" There's no wrong and right. I mean, to suggest, did you do this? Did you miss a word? We're human beings. This isn't like mass or synagogue or mosque where things have been done exactly the same way, for whether it's hundreds of years or decades or whatever else. We hear people, "Oh, you can't speak English in the Longhouse." Well, or what? Look, and I know, I've heard people that I absolutely respect say things like, "The reason we have our Indian names is so the Creator can recognize us." Really? Really? That's why we have them? Look, there's something romantic and perhaps in some ways somewhat desirable to have a belief system. But our culture was not based on a faith-based belief system. It wasn't. It was based on our acknowledging our relationship with nature. And in fact, these ceremonies that we talk about, that's what they're for. It's to acknowledge. And you know what? Is everybody going to attend them? No. You know, when we do the Ohunda Guriwadekwa or the Ganunyok, when we do that, the first thing that we do is we acknowledge the people. And we thank those who have gathered. But the people that I respect most, when they do it, they also acknowledge the people who couldn't gather. The people who perhaps would like to be here, but who aren't here. They couldn't make it. Maybe they're elderly. Maybe they're sick. There could be any number of reasons why when we gather, whether it's for a meeting or a sing or what people call ceremony. And to judge people, to say, oh, yeah, well, they're not attending. It's like we get into this contest about who's more Indian than somebody else. But in the opening, the words we're supposed to say before all else, we acknowledge the people who couldn't come. We acknowledge them because we accept that there are reasons that people cannot attend these functions, whatever they are, whether they're political, whether they're social, whether they're celebratory, cultural, whatever they are. We acknowledge and we accept. If we don't accept, then there's something missing in our understanding of our culture. So does maple have to happen? Does a maple ceremony, the Longhouse ceremony, have to take place? And does it have to be well attended? No, it doesn't. But we should take the time with our children. And you know what? We got social media. We can do it across Facebook. I'm not saying we do our ceremonies on Facebook, but we can make our acknowledgement to all the people that we care about. And we could say, look, I want to acknowledge you on this occasion where we normally celebrate the maple, the flow of the maple sap, and because this is that time of year. Look, to acknowledge that is absolutely appropriate. You know, and I also saw somebody post, well, on Monday there was supposed to be some Indigenous Day of Prayer. Everybody at 6:00 on Monday evening, everybody's supposed to burn tobacco and sage and whatever. Look, you're welcome to do that. But does it all have to be at 6:00 on Monday night? I don't know. We can do some things, and even when we burn tobacco or sage or we smudge or whatever, we should take the time, not just to do it, but to talk about it. Let our children understand. And I guarantee we all have different opinions about that too. Because I'm not a prayerful person. And I know some people say, yeah, that's because you're not as Indian as me. I don't know. People can make their judgments about it. But I still burnt tobacco. But I do it because of what it symbolizes. And I do it to share an idea with the people around me. I'll participate in a tobacco burning. And I have done it myself. I don't do it every day. I don't get up every morning and burn tobacco. I know, but I don't. But I will do it. But the reason for me to do it is because the way it was taught to me. Is it carrying our words to the Creator? No, that's not the way it was taught to me. It symbolizes putting a message out there for the world. But the world that we're actually putting out to is the world around us, the people who are closest to us. So when we do these acknowledgments and we burn tobacco, we're putting on a teachable moment for the people who are with us. And just like with ceremonies, are ceremonies just for children? No, but they're for all of us. Because they're not only social gatherings, they're reminders. The reason we do this is to remind ourselves the significance of the various parts of the year, the season that we're celebrating. So, I mean, the reality is there's over a dozen Thanksgivings that have been celebrated in various places within the Haudenosaunee people. Not everybody does all of them. Some just do the major ones, and that's fine. And that's fine. To some, there are some of these events that throughout the calendar, throughout the year, throughout the seasons, might have more significance. If you don't have a lot of maple trees around you, you probably don't do the maple might not be the ceremony that's important to you. I mean, you can still acknowledge it, and you're welcome to do that. Not every place has this. I mean, a lot of people are buying strawberries for the strawberry festival. There's no problem with that, but that's and why? Because we may not have as many wild strawberries, and that's what we're celebrating that part of the season. So, look, I am not trying to dismiss the importance of our culture. It's what defines us. It is part of what defines us. Even as language has left us, we've managed to hang on to some of these important parts of who we are. But to turn them into these religious rituals, and then start to put them on par with some of these other faith-based religions, I don't think that's elevating our culture. I think it's diminishing it. It's turning it into something mystical, something not real. And look, the definition of faith is to believe in something that's unprovable. That's not what our people had. The closest thing that symbolized faith for Native people was the idea of putting seeds in the ground. Going through the work of putting seeds in the ground, knowing that's going to produce food, plants. That you could say is faith, but it's faith based on something provable. It's not something that you can't understand. So you don't create a belief that you can't substantiate. Trust me, if we were just putting rocks in the ground and nothing ever grew, then we wouldn't have faith that's what happens. And you know what? There have probably been some places in the history of our world where somebody saw us putting these seeds in the ground, thought we were putting pebbles in there. It could have happened. And they went home, put pebbles in the ground, and never saw anything came up. There's probably a story to be told there. And there probably is a story that's told there. Look, we're at the bottom of the hour. I realize we're a little off our schedule here, but so let me take a break and we'll come back. I want to finish. I want to talk more about this. I just want to put some of this stuff into perspective in this very, very difficult and tough time. So we'll take a break and we'll come back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. All right, thanks for coming back. I had to wet my whistle here and get ready for the rest of the show. Before we do that, let me thank our sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, the folks at Grand River Enterprises, and the folks down at Cat Res. I want to thank those guys for supporting the show on a regular basis, and that enables us to keep our equipment going and pay for all the services that we have to pay for to do this show. And normally, to help me get to New York and back, I'm doing my New York show here, and I'm doing it remotely, phoning it in kind of. So that's what we've been doing, and we will be doing that for a while. Hey, the other thing I want to talk about is, look, this show is streaming live on our website, but if you go to our website, there's a lot that's there. I mean, you can listen to not only the shows live while we're doing it, we also have a 24-hour stream of past shows there's always a show playing. it's live when we're live, but otherwise we got a previous show that's playing, from our archives. But we also have a photo gallery. We link we have links to the podcast, to our YouTube videos and all that stuff. But we also have a store. So one of the other ways that people can support what we're doing here is order a T-shirt. We work with Teespring to have shirts printed. We've got a variety of T-shirts. Some of them that are our logo, Let's Talk Native. We've got a bunch of the shirts that Jake designed that have a solid, if not controversial, message to them. Whether it's the Lincoln with the noose or George Washington, the Run of the Gaius shirts. We've got anyway. Look through, take a look at them. White skin shirts with our favorite Run of the Gaius's profile on there. But yeah, take a look at the shirts that we have on our page, and look, it's a way to support the show. It's also a way that you can carry with you and make a statement with the T-shirt that you're wearing. So I encourage you to do that as well. I also, again, want to remind people that if you subscribe to our podcast, you'll get notifications every time we put a show out. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you also get a notification that when we have a new video posted up. Unfortunately, we're not streaming this show live on Facebook. So during the break, where I normally go check the messages and see what people have commented, there was nobody there. So we'll have to look for the comments later on. All right, back on topic. Again, I think it's important that people realize that because of the forces around us, we have a tendency to almost feel like we got to validate our existence within somebody else's frame, with somebody else's framework, and I think we have deviated. Clearly, we've deviated in many ways in the way that we live our lives, the quality of our lives, what we, how we conduct ourselves. Obviously, we speak English predominantly, and although our language is still being taught, and we have speakers, most of us communicate. Look, I don't see I hardly see anybody communicating on Facebook in Seneca or Mohawk. I'm not saying I don't see anybody, but I don't see many. So this is the language that we're using now. So we have our cultures have been compromised. But one of the areas, and the reason I wanted to talk about worship and group worship, especially now with this, with these stay-at-home orders associated with this COVID-19, is on one hand, if your faith in a creator and about protection from that creator is real, then you don't need to pay attention to any of these stay-at-home orders. Go out, put 150 of you together in a church, or 200 or 3,000, or these mega churches down south. Don't pay attention to them. Your God will protect you, or not. But from a Native standpoint, and look, I know plenty of Native people go to church. So again, if you fit into that group, you fit into that group. But from a Longhouse standpoint, there is no requirement. We have parts of these. We do these ceremonies, these festivals, these social gatherings for purposes. But the purpose isn't to worship God or the Creator. It isn't. And I know some of you do it for that purpose. I also know some people do it because they were told to do it. See, this is the difference between knowledge and beliefs. Knowledge is when you know why you do something. Beliefs is when you do it because somebody told you to do it. Hey, look, if you got to drag your kids into a Longhouse and then you got to scold them to be quiet and everything else, that's not much of a celebration. That's a strict ritual. And I've heard people condemn, oh, don't you bring a child into the Longhouse. It's disruptive. So what if it's disruptive? You're not going to ruin a Thanksgiving because your child is having fun. That's something lost. Look, I get it. I've seen the images. I've been in a church. I know how painful it is. Look, comedians all the time, they're always cracking jokes about, laughing in church, misbehaving in church. Why? Because you can't do stuff in a church. And I don't know. I've never been in a Jewish service or a Muslim or Islamic service, so I don't know. But I gotta think it's kind of the same thing. Real strict adherence to a very specific way of doing things. That wasn't the way our Longhouse worked. Our Longhouses worked. I mean, for one thing, even the notion that we have to do these things in a Longhouse is a deviation. Why? Because we turned the Longhouse into a church. Used to be that's where we lived. Now, granted, we may have had either areas of our Longhouse or a specific Longhouse that we built for council. But, the idea of holding council, you only used a building for it when the weather didn't permit you to do it outside. We look, in our culture, we say that. The sky is our ceiling. The earth is our floor. And the four directions are our walls. That's what we say. We say the earth is our Longhouse. Why do we describe where we live as a Longhouse? Why do we describe the Senecas as the keepers of the eastern door and the Mohawks the keepers, or the western door, and the Mohawks the keepers of the eastern door? Why do we do that? Because it's a metaphor for who we are. Because we are the people of the way of that Longhouse. And we counsel a certain way. And we talk about the three sides of a long. Look, if we did it outside, there was no three sides, except for the way we sat. That fire, it wasn't in a metal box. The fire was what we saw. We saw those flames. Because the fire was a symbol of our family. It was a symbol of the gathering. We've lost some of that. Because now we're in a building with a stove, with a little tiny window. You might be able to see some flicker through that. That's not the way it used to be. But it's become that. And because we associate it with a building, that building starts to be treated like a church. And just like churches, they get locked. Look, and I know that rarely do people have enough faith to leave these things unattended. They don't think that the Creator is going to protect it from theft or vandalism. Why? Because it's on us to do that. It isn't on, some supreme being. That isn't a part of our culture. So I guess I just want to put some of this stuff out there. What's happening in the world right now is the spread of a disease. And regardless of how you feel about that, we shouldn't want people to get sick. We shouldn't want to encourage our people to gather, possibly spread this thing, and then take it home to our grandparents or our great-grandparents or anybody in our home who may have a pre-existing condition, an underlying condition, a breathing condition, or diabetes, any of this stuff. We should not want to subject our people to this thing. And we should acknowledge that culturally, historically, we made allowances for the fact that there may be times that we don't gather. There's reasons not to gather. If you had a series of deaths in a community that came up to a period of time for Thanksgiving, that might interfere with that. You prioritized what a community, and if you had a disease that was spreading in an area, that's why we moved our longhouses, our villages. Look, if you had some terrible natural event occur, like storms or floods or fire or blizzard, these may be reasons not to do ceremony. But disease is a reason not to do it too. Illness. So for those of you saying we have to do this because of who we are, because of who we are is the reason we don't do this. We don't jeopardize the lives of our loved ones because of some conversion of our culture into a faith-based religion. So no, I know some of you are going to hear this and you're probably going to bristle at some of what I've said. I consider myself Haudenosaunee, a person of the way of the Longhouse. Do I attend every ceremony? No, I don't. I do on occasion, but I don't make them all, and I don't do them here locally. But I still know enough to acknowledge the seasons. I know enough to share that acknowledgement with my grandchildren and my children. Talk about them, or in the community. So let's be not just pragmatic. I'm not trying to suggest that we have to compromise who we are because of some other dominant culture. There's nothing that is more dominant than nature to us. And some of what nature presents to us, for whatever reason, whether it's nature putting a disease in our midst, or whether it's, weather, calamity, whatever it is, or whether man does it, war, man-made pestilence, caused pestilence, I don't know. But we don't need to put our communities in danger. We lost entire communities in times past because we didn't understand this notion of a pandemic or a plague. And that some of that plague wasn't just smallpox or influenza or tuberculosis. It wasn't just that. Some of it was alcohol. We lost entire communities. We lost a lot of loved ones to residential schools, to massacres, to invasions. But we don't need to do it to ourselves. We need to be an intelligent creature. It's our brains that take care of us. That is what creation provided us. Not some magical force that's going to guide us if we worship it. The power of creation gave us intelligence. It gave us eyes and ears so we could see everything that's around us. And let nature be our guide. Let our intelligence be our guide. We developed language. No, the Creator didn't give us language. Our people who came before us gave us language. We learned how to communicate in a very, very sophisticated way. A descriptive language, a language that was not noun-based, one that was based on description, on action, on what something looked like. Our language was a language of metaphor, always. And so now we take some of those metaphors and we twist it around and come up with literal meanings, and we lose what the meanings of those metaphors were. Especially when it's associated with our stories and our culture and our celebrations, our ceremonies, our festivals. So we have to think bigger. We have to understand when we talk about all those things in all those things that we talk about. And when we describe all of the parts of creation as our relatives, and we call things our cousin, we don't mean cousin in the English sense of the word cousin. We don't mean grandmother or uncle or father in the English definitions of those words. We don't even mean brother in the same way. We talk about our relationships. There is so much in our culture that has got twisted because when we translate something to nephew or niece, we think it's the children of our brother or of our sister, not the children of our community. We've lost some of these definitions because we're using the English definitions. I mean, when I have my friend Degarundage, and he talks about what the word for father means or the word for grandfather means. It doesn't mean that he is the father of your father. It means that you're, as a grandfather, and you look at your grandchild, you see a reflection of yourself. That's what it means. So the words have a different, so now you have a completely different image when you think about respectfully referring to somebody as your grandfather. And it's a different kind of relationship when you understand where the words come from. And in the words of my friend Ed Schindler, when we learn what they were thinking. I spoke to Ed, by the way, today. I reached out to some of the folks over the last few days, especially the folks that I know have some health problems, and regardless of where they are, some of the older folks in my life. I reached out because I wanted to find out how they're doing. What are the circumstances? So I talked to Ed for a good long time today, and we went through something. I told him what I was going to do my show on today. He says, "Well, it's important people understand." He says, "It's important that people understand that the reason," and this is from Ed, that the reason we do these cultural events, these social events, is for the future generations. It isn't for this deified, intelligent, spirit out there that's overlooking us. We do it for the future. We do it to keep who we are alive. So we do it to remind the older ones, and we draw on some of that wisdom of those older ones as we're doing these festivals. We remind our peers, our friends, our relatives, and we teach the young ones. But we don't turn it into some sort of miserable religious sacrament that is all about right and wrong. No, we do it to celebrate the things that creation provides us throughout the year. That's why we do it. And we teach that appreciation. Look, we don't do all the things we did 200 years ago. We don't gather the medicines the same way we did. And even today, when we do gather those medicines, we use a little bit of that Western medicine alongside of it. So, look, we have changed somewhat culturally, but we don't have to abandon any of that stuff. We should bring it forward, but we also don't need to bastardize it. We don't need to turn it into what we rejected. Some of us. We also don't need to feel like we're in competition with the church or the mosque or the synagogue or somebody else's idea of what civilization is. There may be nothing that represents advancement in the understanding of human beings and human nature than our culture. Not the ones that they tried to impose upon us, or the ones that we're told to believe are the dominant religions. Dominant is right, because those were the religions of war. The belief systems that still are at the center of all of the conflicts throughout the globe, and not just the religions of Abraham, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. There are other cultural adaptations of those religions that have mixed with other religious beliefs. But at the end of the day, when you delve into the indigenous cultures, and you really take the time not to try to spiritualize it, not to try to turn everything into a freaking Disney cartoon, but if you really understand the meaning of those celebrations, whether it's the dance or whether it's the music, whether it's the Peach Stone game, when you really take the time to understand it, there's no mystery there. It's just natural. And it makes sense. And you realize that some of the reason you do these things is because of our history, because of what we've learned in the past. The major parts of the ceremonies that we do are a repetition of times that we had to reunite because we had gone astray, because we had fought each other. We lost our way. That's why the reason we do these ceremonies is to remind us of our history, of that past. Not to do something because we think that we're going to be punished if we don't do it, or judged by others if we don't do it. That's not what being Onwe is about, or being Haudenosaunee or Haudenosaunee is about. Being a people of the way of the Longhouse. It's not the building with 2 wood stoves and benches in it. That's not what being Longhouse is about. It's really understanding the extended nature of our families. Those Longhouses are what we lived in, and they don't even remotely resemble what we call a Longhouse today. I've been to a bunch of these communities where the Longhouses were painted white and they look like churches. Some of them even had a bell, and that's how they would tell people to come to Longhouse. Or they'd shoot a gun because they didn't have a bell. And that's not a part of our culture either. Look, and it's fine to add things. You know, in our culture, we say we add rafters to the Longhouse. We bent the bow and we added rafters. We grow the Longhouse because the Longhouse could grow both to accommodate the people, but it would also grow to accommodate. Look, we brought things into our Longhouse: different dances, different songs, different peoples. But what we didn't do was to lose our core values. And, and again, as per my conversation with Ed today, the important thing to remember, especially now, we will have times to gather, but we have to acknowledge the times that we shouldn't. We shouldn't risk bringing our community down with the spread of disease or any of that stuff. When the time is appropriate for us to socialize and celebrate, then we celebrate. If we miss a celebration, we'll pick it up the next time. We'll make up for it during strawberries. Nothing wrong with that. Maybe we make a bigger celebration for strawberries because we didn't have the opportunity to celebrate during maple or whatever. So I'm just trying to put that out there. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And a lot of it, because, I saw, again, through social media, so many of these religious groups condemning this idea that they couldn't hold their church masses. Then I started reading about some of these churches, some of these religious gatherings where people got infected. And then I was reminded again, right here in Seneca territory, during midwinters, that there are a fair number of people who suggested they got the flu. That's where they caught the flu during ceremony. Well, let's not pass this one along. Let's not share this one. We'll gather when we can gather, and we should gather. But the important thing that I have to say now is this is a time that we have to be diligent and responsible to the people in our communities. Not by mass gatherings, but by finding out the best way to make sure that the elders in our community are taken care of. And not just the elders, but there are single parents. There are people who may or may not have the ability to make sure they have all the things that they need. So we shouldn't rely on the nation to do it or these school buses delivering lunches. I mean, it's fine that they do that. By all means, that's fine. But we in each community, and that's what I've seen. Honestly, that's really what I've seen during this time. Some of the even some of the Facebook groups that have been formed to do this. It's encouraging. So, again, folks, be safe. We'll be back. I'll be doing my Thursday show, my New York show here in studio. Hopefully, this Facebook thing is worked out by then. If not, we'll record another one. Look for this one, on YouTube, and I'll share it on Facebook when Jake puts the video up. and of course, this is another podcast. So subscribe to both the YouTube channel and to our podcast. And you, even if you can't catch us live on Facebook for whatever reason, we'll make sure that we get a show out to you. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on Thursday. Yahweh.